Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast. It's Thursday, February 9th at 4:17 p.m. Pacific time. The trade deadline has passed. TV for the day is over. 5 hours of TV. The calls are flying in, the texts are flying in, and it's time for an annual tradition where we just go, man. We just go. You only have so much time to think about all these deals. Bobby Marks, how are you?
I'm good. I am I'm not going to say I'm well rested because I'm not well rested, but I'm good. I was just sitting on doing a segment somewhere and I felt like I was sitting in quicksand here because I am running on fumes, but we're good. Let's get ready to rock and roll here. The West got better, man. The West got better.
We have to start with the end of the greatest theoretical team in the history of the NBA. And what will go down as the greatest failure of star talent in the history of the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets giving up, surrendering, and trading Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns a few days after trading Kyrie Irving to the Dallas Mavericks for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jae Crowder, 4 first-round picks. Are they all unprotected, Bobby? I haven't even checked.
They're all unprotected.
Unprotected first-round picks. They all have to be, I guess. And swaps in between. Pretty much the most the Suns could give up. The Nets have never really loved Ayton, and I actually think the Suns did well to keep Ayton. I think he fits well with this team. I am reminded of a quote that I will think about all the time from a front office person unaffiliated with in the wee hours after the Clippers got Kawhi and Paul George. And I was asking people, what do you think of the trade? What do you think of the trade? And this person said to me, I think it is simultaneously a trade the Clippers had to make and a trade that has the chance to go down as one of the worst trades in the history of the NBA. I don't quite feel that extreme about this because Kevin Durant is Kevin freaking Durant. When he was healthy this season, I think he was the best player in the NBA, right there with Jokic, right there with Giannis, right there with any of them. He is the most malleable, fittable superstar in the history of the NBA. A walking 50, 40, 90, 7-footer, elite defense, the whole deal. There is, by definition, less risk trading for a player of that nature than for any other kind of superstar. However, in all the exuberance, I found myself a little more nervous for the Suns than most people were. And before passing the baton, I will say this. Championship or bust is an inherently unfair standard to which to hold a team because there is so much luck and so much health luck and health variation that goes into winning 4 playoff series in any given year. However, the Suns in trading everything for a 34-year-old who has suffered essentially the same exact knee injury 3 times, along with an Achilles injury and other stuff, and pairing him with a 37-year-old who is very clearly in decline, although he's been playing better lately. That's Chris Paul. And, of course, a prime-age superstar in Devin Booker. You are not just – you are introducing health as a variable that is perhaps more likely to affect your superstar core than the average superstar core. Chris Paul gets hurt in the playoffs every year like clockwork as it is. And – when you trade this much, you look at the history of superstar trades, all of them. We all get very excited about them. They seldom work out well for the team that trades everything for the superstar. When they do work out well, Anthony Davis, you win the championship. Drew Holiday, obviously a tier below this, but a pretty penny was paid for Drew Holiday. Win the championship. When you do this for these guys, I think it's essentially championship or bust for the Suns in the next 2 years. And that feels like an unfair standard foisted upon them by talking heads like me and you. I guarantee you, if they don't win the championship, and we fast forward 3 years and Chris Paul's 40 and out of the league and Kevin Durant's 37 and they've got to figure out life and the picks are looking dangerous, they will view it as a bust if they don't win the championship. The downside risk here is enormous. The picks the Nets got from Phoenix could be potentially really, really valuable. And I guess where I will end is to make a trade like this, I think you have to be the clear favorites to win the title. I'm not sure the Suns are the clear favorites to win the title. I think they're in the grouping with lots of other teams, and maybe they are the best team. So this trade makes me nervous. All that said, I'm excited as all hell to watch the 3 greatest mid-range shooters, or 3 of them all time, 3 of the greatest crunch time players of all time play together, because you ain't stopping that. You ain't stopping that.
You know what's unique about this trade is that this is a trade that Phoenix wouldn't have made in July, and that Brooklyn wouldn't have accepted in July. Right? This is what unique is about it, is that
I don't even remember July, man.
Well, because Mikal Bridges wasn't even involved in, when Phoenix was kind of dipping their toe in the deep end here, and Brooklyn looked at him as a good player, but not not as that kind of that all-star franchise level player that you try to get back when you're swapping out. What I'll also say is that, and I truly believe this, is that if Robert Sarver still owned the team, this trade does not happen.
I was hoping we'd get out of this podcast without mentioning the S word.
Well, I have to, because I believe that if he was still there, it would not have happened, as far as the all-in type approach, the aggressiveness here. Yeah, I mean, as you said, everything comes with risk. 4-1s. Booker hasn't even started a supermax yet. You still have Ayton with 3. I mean, but you have to be healthy. I mean, here's a roster that, with Durant and Booker this year and Chris Paul, who's getting an age, and now it is up to James Jones, not this year, but in a foreseeable future, building this thing out. And, but I mean, it's if you're going to do it, you got to go all in for it. I mean, he's the top 5 player in the NBA this year.
He's a top 12 player in the history of the NBA.
Yeah.
So I guess here's what I'm saying. I think if you played out this Suns team in many multiverses, I think more often, if you played out the next 5 years of Suns history, I think more often than not, they would not win a title. And feel some pain on the back end, but not regret. And I think that's where the power of Kevin Durant comes in. This is a swing. There are some swings where if you miss, you'll be like, man, we knew going in, it's because this is Kevin Durant. If this ends up being a swing and a miss, it's going to hurt. But it's Kevin Durant. Here's the starting 5 for the Suns: Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, probably Torrey Craig, and DeAndre Ayton. That's an awesome lineup. They're thin, but I think they're maybe a little less thin than people think. They got TJ Warren. We haven't mentioned him. Now he's, his minutes have oscillated, but he's been very productive when he plays. The Suns fans know him well. Cam Payne's been hurt most of the year. He'll come back. Shamet is still here. And people who aren't watching the Suns, they're getting good minutes from Damian Lee and Josh Okogie and Bismack Biyombo. And they're going to cobble together, and they'll get a buyout guy. I think the bench will be okay. And the best thing about getting a big 3, if they play their cards right, and this Chris Paul is still a member of a big 3. When the chips are down and the games matter, 2 of those guys are going to be on the floor at all times. And that's even leaving aside Ayton, who I think has become underrated. I think that relationship between Ayton and some of the power brokers on the team is still a little frayed and needs to get better fast, because you can't have a lot of fraying and win 4 playoff series. But I think Ayton's really good. I think they'll have enough of a bench to be fine, but I can't sit here and I feel like they're guaranteed to be the elite favorite in the West. I think I probably would pick them as a slight favorite, but Denver is awesome and got better today. And they're getting beat up today, Denver, for not doing enough. And they only got 2 seconds for Bones. But I think Thomas Bryant's a really good player for them. And they're betting on continuity. They're betting on continuity in a conference that's otherwise betting on change. And we'll talk about the Clippers later and the Warriors later. I think this team's going to be awesome. I still worry about the downside. I think it's less of a home run. I shouldn't say that because it's Kevin Durant. I feel like everyone always underestimates the downside and overestimates the likelihood that you're actually going to get the payoff that you think you're going to get.
Well, and I think too, like with Durant, when you watched him this year before the injury in Miami, you the more you watch and you think to yourself like, man, Brooklyn can't trade this guy. This guy, he is a rare breed. Like a player like that does not come around very often here. And I think the big thing for me is that we always equate the trade deadline or the All-Star break as kind of the halfway point. I mean, we're at like, what do we got? Like 25, 26 games for some of these teams.
That's why Bontemps said this on TV and I almost lost my mind. He's like, the Nets are probably going to make the playoffs. And I was like, I've thought about the Nets as like a conceptual conglomeration and like a star that turned into a black hole. I haven't thought about them. I mean, I've got their rotation written down here. I've got Mills, Sumner, Dinwiddie, O'Neal. I've got all the names written down. Crowder became 5 seconds. Yuta Watanabe. I have Dorian Finney-Smith. I have it right here. Not for 1 second did I think they may just back their way into the playoffs.
Well, I think they got a 10-game cushion, something like that.
No, right? They got like 4. They got like 4 games on the Knicks, I think.
What about out of 10? I mean, out of the top 10, I meant out of like just falling completely out of it. Like you built yourself like a nice little cushion behind. Who's in there? Is it the Wizards are in 10 right now or Chicago? One of those two teams.
I don't know. And I'm not going to check. Yeah. Well, I don't know what you were saying, Bobby. My mind is exploding here. And by the way, the Nets, look, here's the asset flow. And it's depressing. It's depressing. All their young players and picks become Harden. Harden becomes Simmons and 2 first-round picks. Simmons being a black hole and a disaster is the biggest problem the Nets have right now. And like the fact that Harden has turned into like a couple of nice first round picks, if that, and not Simmons. Simmons is a 0. Simmons is just a 0 right now. I'm sorry. Kyrie, they got with cap space. So that's like an opportunity cost thing. Now is Finney-Smith, Dinwiddie in a pick in a second. Durant becomes everything we just talked about with the 5 seconds. I think they've actually done well. Like they're net plus a lot of picks. They all owe those picks to Houston. Houston controls their 4 drafts from 24 to 27. And that could, that mitigates against them tanking because they're going to send all those picks. But they're net plus picks. They have some good players, and they're going to try to make this work one way or another. But there's just no denying that it's a disaster to have these 3 guys together for 16 games, win 1 playoff series, 1. And have it all go up in smoke like this. And I will tell you this, man. You can sit here and blame lots of people, I guess, the Nets for handing over their culture and handing over the keys to the superstars. And maybe that falls on Sean Marks or Josiah or whoever. If Kyrie gets vaccinated before last season, I think they're like the overwhelming championship favorites, and Harden doesn't dip out. And everything is copacetic, but with Kyrie, the record shows like if it's not that, it's going to be something, and it's just a mess. But they recouped some good value here, and I forgot what I was going to say about the Suns, except offensively they're going to be awesome, and Ayton is going to anchor the defense with Durant, and they might have a rebounding problem a little bit, but it's very exciting, man. It's exciting. It's an exciting trade.
Well, I mean, especially that. I mean, you saw it on Thursday, like Dallas got it started on Sunday, Phoenix on Wednesday night, and then all of a sudden, then whether it be New Orleans or Memphis or, certainly Denver made a couple tweaks here. The Lakers, I mean, they're not in that that in the conversation as these teams here, but everybody in the Western Conference started to add to their roster. You're not going to get unless it was OG Anunoby going out west, you're not going to get a guy, Josh Richardson is not the guy to defend Kevin Garnett. That's the reality of it. But you did see a little bit of a shift on Thursday as far as teams starting to add. And I think, just kind of circling back to Brooklyn, like, I don't want to say, was it a failure? Yeah, based on what 13-3, 18-2 in that stretch.
They were incredible when they had Harden and Kyrie.
Well,
and Durant. They were incredible.
And even this year, I know a lot of the teams they played against were either injured and, they got them on a back-to-back.
You don't chance your way into 18-2 in the NBA.
You don't. And Durant gets hurt in Miami. Kyrie basically carries them in Utah and Golden State. In that, I think it was in that Knick game at home. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm doing my part, I want my extension and everything. And I mean, you pivoted and you got the draft picks and you saved $100 million. And now we're back to basically the 2018-19 roster. I mean, that's how, the 43 fun win team that is going to take a little bit, and you've got flexibility. But man, what you had and what you don't have now is, nobody, I don't know who goes through something like that within an 18-month period.
And this front office, look, Sean Marks and his crew, they've proven they can rebuild from nothing, from less than nothing. And they don't have less than nothing now. They got something. A couple of things on that before we go back to the Suns. I will believe also, to my proverbial grave, that if they had their druthers in 2019 free agency, they would have taken Durant alone. I don't think they ever wanted is a strong term. They obviously respect the talent of Kyrie Irving. If they had their choice of scenarios, I think it would have just been, let's add Durant to this nice team we've been building up and figure it out from there. Once they got Harden, I will believe this too. I think the best iteration of all the iterations of their team was getting Harden and then trading Kyrie for depth and picks and just going KD, Harden, let's go deep around them. And obviously we never got to see any of that play out. By the way, do you remember, you may not remember the conspiracy theory that I floated almost entirely jokingly to Howard Beck on this podcast about 6 or 8 months ago?
I don't remember that.
So this is my Matchstick Men con artist movie conspiracy theory that I have said, anyone listening to this who has any inkling that it's true or was involved in it, please in 20 years call me and let me write the book on it. The conspiracy theory is Houston and Philly are interconnected organizations. I mean, just top to bottom, interconnected, still so close. Harden clearly loves the Rockets and the Rockets organization. The conspiracy theory, Bobby, is that the Sixers, James Harden, and the Houston Rockets identified the Brooklyn Nets as a middleman, as a hapless, witless victim that they could use to get Harden where he wanted to go, which was Philadelphia, but on the way, destabilize the Nets so that the picks the Rockets got back would increase in value. And I'm telling you, man, with every passing day and every passing event in the NBA, I'm like, I'm starting to believe my own lunacy with this.
It's the NBA script, right? Everything's kind of like the conspiracy in the NFL.
And I know what people are going to say. You couldn't script the pandemic and the vaccination thing, and that's really what did it. I'm like, it's always something with Kyrie. That's all I'm saying. Let's talk more about the Suns. Team's gonna be good. Durant is. Let's talk about Durant. We got into this argument on the show today about Durant's legacy and whether he needs a title in Phoenix or Phoenix to be his team to burnish his legacy. And I on the one hand, I reject all that because Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. We all know what this dude is. We all know. And on the other hand, I do think a lot about the what if of 2016 free agency. And if he had to do it over again, and I think there's justification to this. No one is ever going to look at those two Warriors championships as hard-earned championships, even though that's not to say they didn't work hard and, blah, blah, blah. But the deck was so stacked in their favor that people want to see stars in adversity, and they did not face much adversity, although they did have a 7-game series in the second one against the Rockets. They're never going to hold those titles as equal to Dirk in 2011, Steph last season, pick one, whatever one you like. And I think there's something fair about that. And I think about that what if in 2016, Oklahoma City, Boston, Washington couldn't even get a meeting, but that would have been a fun story. I don't know that this is his chance to sort of find that perfect title, because it can never really be your team when you walk in last, even if you're the best player on the team, which he is by a lot. But I do think he'll always be Kevin Durant to me, and the talent is the talent. I do think that every NBA story is in search of the best ending. And I think a title in Phoenix would be the closest thing that there is for Durant to have the best ending.
Yeah. And I think this is probably, I know Devin Booker and Chris Paul have been there, and DeAndre Ayton, but this is probably, I would say this is more of his team. He hasn't even played a game than it probably was in Brooklyn. Right. Like Brooklyn, he basically went there with Kyrie. He missed the first season. Basically, Kyrie established his roots as the guy, not the most talented of the two, but the guy the first year here. And I look at Durant as kind of being like this is his Phoenix team right now. And he hasn't even played a game yet.
They're going to be so awesome to watch, because offensively, the pick and roll combinations, Chris Paul and KD can't switch it. Devin Booker and KD can't switch it. You have 3 of the greatest crunch time mid-range assassins the league has ever seen, and Ayton to anchor it. And I think there will be enough depth there. It's going to be a dogfight in the West between them and the Nuggets and some other teams we're going to talk about soon. I'm trying to think if I'm out of Suns, Nets.
Well, here's a, what's going to be interesting too is just the ownership change, where you basically want baptism by fire right now, right? Here's your crash course on owning a team, basically 2 days in for Matt Ishbia, right? Ishbia, is that how I'm saying it?
What is the equivalent of this? If I buy a car, is it driving 120 miles an hour down my neighborhood street? Is it getting flames on the side of it? Is there a real life equivalent to what these new NBA owners do? And they're just like, yeah, let's make a splash.
Well, I think it's basically doing wind sprints up and down the street. That's what it's like doing.
Anyway, please continue the new owner thing.
No, I just think this was it's almost like when Prokhorov came in Brooklyn here, is that you see something you want and you will go out and get that. And there's not a price associated within the rules here. And sometimes it fails, sometimes it works out, and it's just based on him owning this team, or, getting permission, whatever it was 2 days ago. This is his big splash, and he had both, feet in the deep end on this. He wasn't just a bystander. He was involved in this.
Oh, very involved. Very, very involved. Let's just revisit the timeline of events for the Nets. So they trade Kyrie to Dallas after he demands a trade, and they get what they get for him, which was pretty good. That trade was clearly designed with the aim of keeping Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. And that's what you have to do. It's Kevin Durant. He's good enough that if you can give him another talented player via the trade deadline, give him another talented player in the summer. And I think they told him, hey man, in the summer, like we could get some big names. There are going to be some big names that might ask out in the summer, and we're going to collect stuff to give ourselves a shot at it. And I'm not going to name who those names are. But I think that's the conversation that was had. They tried to get Pascal Siakam now in the intervening 96 hours because KD made it known he likes Pascal Siakam. He thought it'd be a good fit. I think that that's perfectly fine. It and then the tides changed and they did the best they could. The NBA isn't always clean like this. You don't get to order the transactions exactly the way you want them. And the Nets come out with a bunch of first round picks and a bunch of good players, and they'll just have to figure it out going forward. And I mean, undeniably, they certainly didn't envision winning one playoff series in 4 years. But here we are, and there's nothing to do but put one foot in front of the other.
No, I mean, life goes on, right? I mean, they're, as I said, 25 games and they've got, I mean, here's a crazy thing too. You know, like that bounty of draft picks probably could have increased if they didn't, if they wanted to put Mikal Bridges on the market. You know, when you look at
Bobby, they were offered. I know of one team, and I've confirmed this. I know of one team that offered them 4 first-round picks.
Yeah, for a guy who's never made the All-Star game, is a good, one of the better defenders, doesn't miss games, two-way player.
No, I know of at least 3 first-round picks. I think the 4th one may have had some protections or something, but I'm pretty sure that's a thing.
And that's your kind of your blue chip guy. But for me, it's like, would you rather have the picks or Mikal Bridges? And I think, first of all, as you mentioned before, like Houston owns all those picks, right? 24, 26, pick swaps, right? 23, 25, 27. There's no incentive to bottom out here. There is none to go in trade Bridges and Johnson and basically just have a skeleton crew and get the top 3 pick year after year. There is no incentive. Like eventually you're going to have to put a baseline of guys that compete, can win you 43, 44 games here. But the Bridges component added another layer here because Brooklyn could have eventually walked out of the week, the week of trade deadline week with 9 unprotected first. That's amazing.
You know what though? Mikal Bridges is awesome. He's on an awesome contract. He's an awesome guy. Nets fans are gonna love him. I get just being like, you know what? We just did a lot of stuff. Let's just like have some good players. Okay, let's transition out of this deal because I don't think I have anything left to say about it. The Lakers, team number 2 on our list, made I think 3 separate trades in the last two days, headlined by their 3-team trade with Minnesota and Utah. So, and this is of course after the Hachimura trade. So let's review. Into the Lakers comes D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Mo Bamba, and Devon Reed. Out go Russell Westbrook, Patrick Beverly, some stuff, and a top 4 protected first-round pick in 2027. They traded one of the picks, not both, just one. And very importantly, as I reported last night, if that pick is in the top 4, it immediately converts to a second-round pick going to Utah. There is no extended protection. They did not encumber any other trades. So they took a half measure. And I've been saying all year, I almost wonder if the half measure is almost the worst thing they can do. So you trade one pick, you make yourself feel better because you got a little bit better. You didn't trade both picks, but what have you actually accomplished other than lighting a pretty good pick on fire? Their new starting 5 will be D'Lo, probably, I'm guessing D'Lo, somebody, LeBron, Rui, and AD probably, and the somebody could be lots and lots of people. It could be Austin Reeves, it could be Troy Brown Jr., it could be, pick somebody.
Malik Beasley.
Could be Malik Beasley, although I like him kind of better just coming off the bench and wrecking. And I'm here to say in the light of day, despite my half measure worries, I kind of think this is fine for the Lakers. Even if the only thing it does is make LeBron less likely to agitate for a new team over the summer, we can finally do that again. I don't really think this changes their life that much as a team. They're very far behind, even like 7th or 8th right now. They're like 2 behind 10th and 4 behind those spots. So it's an uphill climb just to get home court in the play-in, if they can even get there. Defensively, they got Jared Vanderbilt. If I didn't say Jared Vanderbilt, I'm sorry. He's a really interesting piece, and whether he can play with AD or not is something that I think will be something to monitor, because that's the best way to beef up their defense. It comes at the cost of shooting. And I know Jared Vanderbilt shoots a corner 3 every game, but no one's guarding him there. I just look at this and it's to me, I can't get excited about it. It's just kind of fine to me. It's fine. And I just don't think it really makes that much of a difference.
Well, here it goes. It goes back to how many games are left in the season. And you got, LeBron didn't play Thursday night against Milwaukee. I feel like every time AD falls down, I don't know if he's going to get back up here. And as you said, like, you got to make up ground. Like, so you finish 9 or 10, you got to win 2 games to get in. And then you're going to be faced with probably Phoenix or Denver in the first round. I mean, good luck with that there. But so did they improve their roster? They did. They took an approach where you're staring at this offseason here. You got whatever, $34 million in room. What does $34 million in room get us when we have Anthony Davis and LeBron James making 90 million plus? And you basically took that and you broke it up into Rui Hachimura a couple weeks ago. We'll see what happens with Russell, who's a free agent. People were talking about extensions with him. Like, I know he's eligible for 2 for 67. But why? Who are you bidding against?
To me, one of the values of this deal for the Lakers is that he's a free agent. Yeah. Malik Beasley has a team option, so I can wash my hands of him if need be. And Vanderbilt only makes like 4.7 next year. That's a value contract. People will love to have him. If the Lakers want cap space, they can still get the 30 plus million in cap space. I'm not extending D'Angelo Russell even for 2 years.
No,
if the downside is swallowing up my cap space.
No, that's. I mean, if I'm the Lakers, I'm like saying, let's play this out and stuff, and let's see what the market is going to be. But you get all these, and then you get Mo Bamba, who's got a non-guaranteed contract for next year.
That's right. He's got 9. You can just wipe that away.
Who else?
If you want,
Devon Reed too, right? From Denver. He's got a non-guaranteed contract. So I kind of look at it more for next year. Like, you can either bring back 8 or 9 of these players, including LeBron and AD, or you pivot and kind of go the cap space direction. Do you go with signing trades? You get a lot of more flexibility than you did before here, but it helps. But as I said, like, I mean, we're 25, 26 games left in the season here, and you just lost at Oklahoma City. You might go on a little bit of a tailspin. LeBron, looked out of gas at the end of that, out of the, the Oklahoma City game.
He's out tonight against Milwaukee.
Yeah, and he's out tonight. So
and every game is precious now. Like, LeBron out tonight against Milwaukee is not something you just like shrug off. Like, if they lose tonight, every loss is like another brick you got to move.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they get in by default. Maybe Utah continues to, if they lose a bunch of games, and Portland, made the Josh Hart trade, and they bring back Cam Reddish. So maybe they get in default as the number 10 seed, win their games they're supposed to, and now you're, as I said, you're kind of staring at winning 2 games and just getting in to be the number 8 seed.
Well, that's what they have going for them. The Thunder traded Mike Muscala to Boston, which is like a sneaky, I don't want to say tank move. Wendy said that on TV. I don't think Mike Muscala is good enough or plays enough minutes to qualify as a tank casualty, but they have always been very good when they play Mike Muscala, particularly with SGA. And those minutes are going to go to players who are worse than Mike Muscala, even if it's only 15, 16, 17 a game. I think that trade signals that the Thunder are okay if they don't finish in the top 10 this year. And in fact, okay if they slide back just a little bit in the Wemby sweepstakes. The Blazers we'll talk about later. Some might argue they stood pat. Some might argue they are operated as sellers, whatever. And Utah obviously sold a bunch of things. So that's what the Lakers have going for them. And that's fine. If all this does is placate LeBron, it's fine. I just don't think this turns them into like a contender or someone that the best teams are are super scared of. It does get them out of the rust thing, which was going to go down as an all-time disaster. I don't know about you, Bobby. I hear these reports about the Clippers being interested in Russ, and I haven't been able to confirm that interest myself. And I think someone said on TV, Paul George, because of their relationship from OKC, is agitating for him. Man, if I'm the Clippers, I am steering in the complete opposite direction of that iceberg, because I just think he's just a bad fit. He just plays this like helter-skelter, crazy turnover, can't shoot. I don't want it. Even Miami, which has been rumored for a year, it's like they're already deficient on shooting with Butler's just not a high volume 3-point shooter, Bam, and on and on. Like, I just don't see it, man. Like I don't see it.
The only team I could think of when I said it on TV earlier would be Chicago. And basically the Billy Donovan factor, he had him in OKC. This team is like, I mean, they're just like,
to what end?
Just to cause havoc
to your own team,
just to see if a fuse can be lit under this group. But that's really it. I mean, I think what could happen is that, they might just, he's going to probably go sent home, and he won't, you probably don't do a buyout, and you become an unrestricted free agent, and you kind of go into, you go into the summer that way.
We should, there's probably more stuff we should talk about the Lakers. One of the reasons I think it's a good trade for them is, you mentioned we're 2/3 of the way through the season, but just dumping Russ was going to cost them a pick. So to get you're only dumping Russ again for a third of the season, so the finances aren't the same. But to get real talent, and these guys are like, Beasley is good, and they're begging for an elite shooter on this team. Let's talk about the Wolves and D'Lo, actually,
yeah.
and the Wolves pivoting to Mike Conley as part of this 3-team trade. This trade to me sends a very clear message that there is something that Minnesota Timberwolves and other teams do not like about D'Angelo Russell. That it could be defense, it could be chemistry, it could be something that we don't even know about. But this guy is having by far the most efficient offensive season of his life, shooting the absolute crap out of it. Is a free agent after the season. Whatever you want to make of that. And they were like, yeah, no, we're good. Like, we want Mike Conley. We want Mike Conley, who's old and doesn't align with our timetable at all, is like anti-aligning with our timetable. And we just want you to go away. And we want Mike Conley because he has 1 year left on his contract after this one. We can then wash our hands of him. Anthony Edwards max deal, inevitable max deal will kick in as Conley's deal comes off. We don't have to worry about paying D'Angelo Russell. We don't even want to negotiate anymore with D'Angelo Russell. This is like a red flag thing for me about D'Angelo Russell. Mike Conley's been good. He's actually averaging, he's averaging a career high in assists?
Yeah, it was like seven around there. So, yep.
Can still shoot it pretty well. Has lost some burst, as one does. Defensively has gone from one of the better point guard defenders to a liability. I think he's not really going to lift up their defense relative to Russell, maybe a little bit, because he's just dialed in and tries really hard. And he can throw lobs to Gobert and get them organized and all of that. To me, I think Minnesota's probably about as good. Maybe I guess if you believe in the organizing thing and the chemistry thing, maybe a little better. And you could see the frustration in games of D'Angelo just didn't like passing to Gobert and like got frustrated when Gobert would drop the ball and stuff. I don't know. I can't get excited about that trade for Minnesota, though. It doesn't really excite me, especially remember the fanfare. The fanfare
when they made the trade with Golden State.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll never forget Gerson Rosas at the press conference saying, we looked at other point guards, but we didn't trade him because this is a point guard we wanted. I'm like, oh, this really? You're that excited? And now it's like, please go away. We just want Mike Conley. Just give us Mike Conley is like a nice a nice glass of milk, just like old reliable Mike Conley. Just give us some glass of milk.
You know what the red flag for me is? That when was the last time you saw a team like Minnesota who doesn't have their first round pick and is owned by a Utah team you just made a trade with to acquire their point guard? I mean, that's like, and I understand, like, getting Conley back, who's got, partial guarantee next year, not want to pay, Russell here, but that in itself sends that you're willing to get out of him and do a deal with a team that basically kind of controls that pick in Utah.
That race, because they need to make the playoffs. The Wolves, obviously owing that pick to Utah, need to be in the playoffs. They're 8th right now at 30-28. The Pelicans are 29-27, so they're tied. Clippers 31-27, upgraded. Suns 30-26, kind of upgraded. Dallas 30-26, did something. Whatever. They didn't get appreciably worse at the very least. Got more dynamic, we'll say. Let's be polite. Minnesota's 13-7, I think, in its last 20 games. Has actually been playing pretty well. Absolutely has got to make the playoffs. That race between those teams and the Warriors right below the Wolves is going to be super intense. But the other thing is, man, like, they're getting older by the trade. Like, Vanderbilt's 23, Beasley's 26, and I understand these guys are ultimately kind of fungible role players in the NBA, but they just get like older and older and older. And but Ant's going to be a star. Cat's going to come back. Cat's kind of a big moment for Karl Anthony Towns coming up, because the team has stabilized somewhat without him. Gobert's gotten a little bit of a rhythm defensively without him. They've done well with Slow-Mo at the power forward. Things just kind of what I said when Cat got hurt was, like, the good thing they have going for them is they can just pivot into an identity that makes sense with Rudy at the 5 and 4 perimeter oriented guys around him. It's a big moment for Cat coming up right now.
It's a big moment for him. It's a big moment when Zion gets back here. For Minnesota, you're right. Like, it's kind of like they cultivated around Edwards. I feel like it's more his team based on, how he's played. And I think Rudy's kind of found his footing. Now you're going to, now everyone shifts. Now Towns goes to the 4. Now do we see more Naz Reid? Do we see less of Naz Reid? Taurean Prince, Kyle Anderson, guys like that here. And, getting in, where they are right now playing, for them, it's getting into that try to get into that top 6.
Any other Lakers thoughts? They traded Thomas Bryant. That was interesting. I think Thomas Bryant, Ramona reported he wanted out of there. That's correct.
It's a good deal for Denver.
It's a very good deal for Denver. It's sort of Zeke Naji, DJ insurance, and a guy who can really shoot it. Not much more to talk about with Denver. Let's talk about the Warriors.
Yeah.
Effectively traded James Wiseman for Gary Payton II, with also 5 second-round picks going to Portland in that deal. And we can talk about Portland in conjunction with that. Wiseman has a chance to go down as, I wouldn't say the Darko Milicic of this era for the Warriors, because there's, if you look at that draft before Halliburton, there isn't that much pain and regret.
Who's in the old? What about the old Condi draft? Maybe.
He was number 1 though. He was number 1 though. But I think if you look at that draft, it's really LaMelo at 3, and then all the way down to Halliburton at 12 when you really feel some pain. But they get GP2, which is interesting on a number of levels. Like, he helps, he knows their system, he can be a lob threat when they have the Splash Brothers out there. We all saw that. We know that he was a valuable part of their finals teams. They also have a lot of guards, man. Steph, Clay, still mostly a guard. Poole, DiVincenzo, GP2. this fills a need of like just another good player, and Wiseman was not going to play for this team this year. But I understand why Warriors fans may look at this and they love GP too, so maybe they're just excited for the reunion. I know the Warriors were sniffing around a lot of stuff. They were sniffing around Anunoby, and that would have been the positional need that I kept talking about. Like, I don't think they need centers, and I don't think they need a guard as urgently as they need another big wing. But ultimately, I don't really think they ever got close with Toronto, and the price would have had to include Kuminga and above and beyond that too.
I think it would have had to include all of them. I mean, I think it would have been, they would have had to
Wiseman's for sure.
Yeah, Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody, some type of pick probably in there somewhere. I mean, you're basically giving them all up.
Somehow Sadiq Bey ended up going to Atlanta as part of all this. James Wiseman now plays for the Pistons, who have 9 centers on their team again. But the last time they had 9 centers on their team, they pivoted out of it. I don't know really what to think of the Warriors in the wake of this. What do you think of the Warriors in the wake of this?
Well, I mean, I think what I think of the Warriors is that, as we've talked about at length, that Wiseman did not fit their timeline, right? Like, he did not, like, basically kind of like there was an expiration date of waiting for him. And if they felt that the upside warranted holding on to, they would have. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it originally turned into what was reported, went from a salary dump, right? Draft picks getting back to Gary Payton II, as you mentioned, another kind of smaller guard. But I mean, I give them credit because there are so many organizations that when you draft the number 2 pick in a draft, man, you're going to hold on for dear life, and hopefully it eventually figures out. But what happened is that you'd be entering year 4 in an extension year, and you become a free agent here. And I am a little surprised that he was traded, just based because you kind of heard that, no, we're not trading. You're not trading Wiseman. Joe Lacob went on record here, and you bring back a guy, Gary Payton, who was probably looking for more than what his current contract is right now in Golden State. It's and got a nice number. But yeah, I mean, I think the Wiseman pick will turn out to be disappointing. I do give him credit for kind of pivoting away from him.
Yeah, I've been saying this all along. Like, you can't be precious with him anymore. He's going into his 4th season. He's going to make $12 million next year. I understand he's barely played. He barely played in college, the whole thing. It's like at some point you just don't have time. Like, this is Steph Curry's team, Steph Curry's time. You got to upgrade around Steph Curry. They did. And I keep waiting for this team to make a run, because I do think they're going to. I think they're super dangerous. They did not come out of this with the big splash I think some people were thinking about. But the other thing is money. Gary Payton makes what, like 8 a year or something?
Yeah, like eight and change, right? Like 3 years, 27. I think that's what he got in Portland.
Any acquisition of a big money player like OG Anunoby would have raised serious questions over, well, we already got these other 5 dudes making huge amounts of money. 3 of them are foundational, immortal players for us. Do we have to get rid of one of these guys? And who is it going to be? And with Anunoby, I always looked at it as he's a pretty mechanical offensive player. I wonder how much of a learning curve there would have been for him in the Steve Kerr read and react, everyone flying around offense. And the other thing that teams who looked at Anunoby, and there were some strong offers for Anunoby, they also have to look at, like, if he is not psyched about his role right now in Toronto as like the 4th option, I mean, most of the teams that want him to play that same role. And so you have to run the risk of, well, is he going to be unhappy here and leave in a year? And we've traded a bunch of stuff for a guy who's out the door.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, and as we've talked about, I mean, it could be a free agent in 2014, and what he did in Toronto, what he's done in Toronto, the system there. I mean, man, if you're giving up the farm and it doesn't work out, I mean, man, good luck. But from what I've told, basically half the league put in offers for him, up in Toronto. And if Toronto wanted to pivot away from him and take the best offer and basically kind of go into like a bidding war, they could have done it. But I think for the Raptors perspective, it's kind of, hey, we know what's out there now. We're going to go into the offseason. Maybe it gets a little bit better.
Boy, if they could have gotten Kuminga, and to be clear, I don't think those two teams ever really got down to brass tacks. I don't know why quite yet. We're just in the wake of this. But that would have been a piece I was interested in. Just for instance, I've heard Memphis offer 3 first-round picks for Anunoby, but Toronto made it clear to these teams, like, we want a player too, like a really good or potentially really good player, and I don't think that sort of player was on the table from their view, at least in Memphis. Indiana, I heard, offered 3 first-round picks and the Rockets' second-round pick, which I believe they own in this coming draft, which is almost like another first-round pick. Yep. But again, the player chip wasn't there for Toronto, and so they moved to fight another day. Before we let you go and bring in Kevin Pelton to relieve you, like, Kevin Pelton's warming up in the bullpen.
I know.
Like,
I've only gone 4 2/3, and my pitch count's at 100.
Sorry, Kevin Pelton's warming up in the bullpen like Turk Wendell in 1999 from my beloved late 90s, early 2000s Mets. Turk Wendell with his shark tooth necklace. Remember that guy? Love that guy.
Oh, the good old days.
I got to figure out who our ESPN Armando Benitez is. Someone I would never trust to throw a strike if his life depended on it. We're really getting into weeds here. This is what happens on trade deadline day. I start thinking about Armando Benitez and John Franco and Turk Wendell and Dennis Cook. Cookie's coming in. Okay. The Clippers did not trade a first-round pick and did not trade Terrence Mann. Did trade. So let's just go. In comes Bones Highland, Eric Gordon, mercifully Eric Gordon, and Mason Plumlee. God, I hate watching Mason Plumlee play basketball. Reverse dunks for everybody. Out goes Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard, and John Wall. Luke Kennard goes to Memphis, which I think is a nice. We didn't do the big thing, but we'll do a small thing. And really, just like, if we're going to get a player who defensively is going to be challenged for us, A, we believe in our infrastructure defensively around him, and B, he's A++ at the one thing we're D++ at. So let's roll the dice. Second round picks, bring in Luke Kennard. Did the Clippers get better? Like, this is a revolving door of 6 NBA Mad Libs names. Are they better? Are they different? Are they anything? What is this? This is the biggest year in the history of the Clippers franchise. This is year 4 of Kawhi and PG. Did they do enough?
I think they did it. Did they do enough? What would have been enough? What would have been enough, basically, given everything, and seeing if you can shake Fred VanVleet from Toronto?
They had no traction with Fred VanVleet.
No,
I don't think it was ever even close. It would have required Mann and the pick for sure. I don't even think. I just don't think they were in the ballpark. I don't think Toronto really wanted to trade Fred VanVleet.
No, and I think once Mike Conley went to Minnesota, then your kind of options are limited here, because I know that that certainly was a guy that intrigued them a little bit here. And Eric Gordon, he can win you a playoff game coming off the bench. I like Mason Plumlee as a backup. Giving you 15 minutes. I know you're going to see 4 screens a game and 2 for 6 in the free throw line. I know you're going to see it, but as a backup, not playing 35 minutes, I'm fine with that. That's something at Bones Highland, you get a guy on an inexpensive contract here. You basically
Bones Highland is a very Clippers move in that they just find ways to pluck these players that are young and can help them for years to come if they hit. There's always like this if they hit.
Yeah, I mean, and the 2 guys that in the 2 point guards, I mean, they weren't part of the future. I mean, John Wall has been I guess, a disaster, or, just didn't work out, and Reggie Jackson was going to be a free agent. So now you basically have kind of, Terrence man into point, certainly Paul and Kawhi at times playing kind of, the point forward here, but I like what they did. I think they've improved a little bit, but I think a lot of it's just going to be about, this group playing together here. Basically kind of, the games they went on this East Coast trip, whether it be the Brooklyn game or the Knicks game, the game they lost in Milwaukee, there was still something about there was like, I'm not ready to trust them. The Dallas game the other night without Luka, like I don't know if I just can't trust this roster.
It's funny you say that, because I picked the Clippers to make the finals.
I did too.
Season.
I did too.
One every 4 games, they'll play a game where like the ball is just flying and Kawhi looks like Kawhi, and Norm Powell has been sensational lately. He's scoring the ball, and like defensively, Nick Batum's front and centers, and they're getting deflections. They're getting their hands on balls and things like that. They're actually like remembering that they are allowed to score in transition, and it looks amazing. Then they'll have games, and this is the kind of game you're talking about. It's the kind of game that has been gnawing at my gut, like the Milwaukee game, like their Philly game recently, like some other games, like the Dallas game last night, where they play pretty well and they don't win. And like I almost feel better when they play badly and they don't win, because they just played badly. They've had a lot of games that have left me cold, in the sense of like, they actually kind of played Clipperish, like what I want to say is Clipperish basketball, and they just came up a little bit short against a good team. And it makes me think something's missing. And I don't, Eric Gordon and Mason Plumlee help. They help for sure.
They help. It's just a matter of, what are they going to be? The 3 seed, 4 seed, 5 seed here? I mean, good luck running into that Denver team. Good luck.
And Denver has their number, as I've said many times.
That is correct.
But Eric, so Plumlee, the Plumlee thing is interesting, because, all the focus has been on the Clippers need a point guard, and they love these centerless lineups that they've built their whole team to other than Zubats, like in the non-Zubats. Well, they didn't get a point guard, and they got a center who's got to play. Like, you don't trade this stuff for Mason Plumlee. Not that they traded a lot for him to play. And he's kind of remember how Hartenstein's passing kind of invigorated their second unit. Plumlee's a really good passer in the short roll too. And Gordon, one of the things I like about Gordon is he defends up in size, up in position. If you're going to switch a lot, he's got the heft and the strength and the tenacity to jostle with bigger guys. And that fits in. He's a really good shooter, and he'll bulldoze to the rim, and they need a little bulldoze. They need more bulldozing to them. I think they're better today than they were yesterday. I just don't know if they're better enough for me to shake that feeling like maybe it's just not going to happen. Especially now with KD there, they're going to be interesting, really interesting. They got better. I just don't know how much better.
No, they got better. I think every team basically I think every team in the Western Conference got, one way or another.
You know who didn't get better? And I applaud them for it. Sacramento.
Yeah.
I was
agree.
like, the worst thing this team can do is get
irrationally
exuberant.
All in, and I agree. I think they kind of know who they are. They did a cash deal, really minor deal, but they kind of really know who who this roster is right now.
All right, Bobby, you got to go. You got to go record other things. I got Kevin Pelton. Kevin Pelton's finished. The bullpen cart has gone out to find Kevin Pelton. Do they still have bullpen cart? They haven't had those in like 30 years. Enter Sandman is playing over the PA system, and Kevin Pelton,
he'll give you a slow trot in.
Come in and the slow. I would walk if I were a relief pitcher. Like, man, I've been sitting out there eating sunflower seeds the whole game, talking to the fans. It seems like the best job in baseball would be middle reliever. I get to sit in the bullpen. I got my own little separate yard over here I get to talk to the fans. I might catch a home run ball. I got food. Seems great. Bobby Marks, thank you for all your help. And we will now bring in Kevin Pelton to wrap up trade deadline 2020. 2023. What did I say? 2020? Oh my God, my brain is fried. Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.
Fresh from the bullpen, Kevin Pelton has trotted into the infield. He's ready to go. I will start with you where I left off with Bobby. What exactly did the Clippers do in your view? And are they better than they were yesterday with this rigmarole of transactions?
I mean, I feel like the trade that clearly leaves them the best relative to all three of these is maybe the Plumlee addition. I think, like, he's, as you've talked about on the pod, he's having a really terrific season. He feels a need for them. I mean, I don't know how much necessarily he'll play in the playoffs, but they haven't been very successful with these smaller lineups in the regular season, or at least have been able to get away with using them as much as maybe they intended to coming into this season, in part because Robert Covington hasn't played very well. So I think that one leaves them better. The Gordon for Kennard swap, I'm a little uncertain about, and the Bones Highland move seems slightly more like a long-term play to me. Just get someone who's
sure,
improve and has potential into that system, a system that doesn't necessarily have a ton of that.
Before my take on the Clippers, I think they are better. You're hesitant on the Eric Gordon, Luke Kennard thing.
I mean, Kennard is a really good shooter, and for the playoffs, I get it. It's hard to hide him defensively. Gordon's going to be much easier to fit into that scheme. But, Kennard is a really plus shooter, and Gordon, the volume has been there in Houston, but the percentage has not necessarily always been there.
I like Kennard for the Grizzlies. It's not the kind of swing I wanted them to take because I think the playoffs will be tough for him, and him next to Ja is going to be flammable on defense, but they do have a good ecosystem to cover for him. How much do you like that? Does that make a difference in your Grizzlies projections?
I don't think it makes a huge difference, but I also like it from that standpoint of, you've been going on for a while about how they just need one more guy that you can count on. And, I don't know if Kennard gets you all the way there, but I think relative to some of their younger wings, Laravia, in Roddy, I think he's a little bit more reliable. We have seen him in a playoff setting. He did average almost 15 minutes a game for the Clippers in 2021, all the way to the conference finals. And again, this is someone like you have to account for at all times as a shooter. And the Grizzlies, that was obviously their weakness. They needed someone like that.
Yeah, and extending the wing rotation is good. The Grizzlies are tough. Just before we move on to trades that I haven't talked about, since I have not had you yet, what is your headline reaction to Durant to Phoenix?
I mean, the Suns are all in, and this is a reasonable hand to go all in with, because I think one of my big takeaways from this season is I was always kind of skeptical of this idea that, okay, the Suns can contend now, and then also they've got this young core that is going to be contenders after Chris Paul is gone. And I think that the way that Ayton has kind of stagnated his development this season, Mikal Bridges has seen his efficiency suffer, having to create a lot more of his own offense with Paul and Booker out of the lineup. That suggested to me that idea is not realistic, no matter how good Devin Booker is and some of their young talent. So I think that to me was a compelling argument to focus on, let's win right now while Chris Paul is still in this period. I mean, the other option, that we talked about the last time I was on the pod was if they had gone for a younger option at point guard, that could have made sense. But, if Kevin Durant's out there, I think you move heaven and earth for him. This is why Brooklyn went through everything they went through the past 4 years, because Kevin Durant is worth it.
Yeah, there was didn't Woj report in his story that they were sniffing around a John Collins deal, Phoenix?
Sounds right.
There was part of me that was like, that's such a lower risk long-term wise, in terms of the picks and stuff, young players you're going to have to give up. And I actually think the Suns were sneakily playing pretty well since Chris Paul's return, to the point that you could see them with like Chris, Devin, Mikal, Cam Johnson, Ayton, and like a player like John Collins. Like maybe that's actually good enough to get where they want to go. They concluded it's not. And when you look at sort of what other teams did to beef up, and I know some of the teams did that to react to their acquisition of Durant, it's hard to blame them for saying we'd actually need a higher upside talent. Let's talk about one of your specialties in the Pacific Northwest, the Portland Trailblazers, who I kind of feel like straddled the line between buying and selling, so to speak. They acquired Matisse Thybulle, Cam Reddish, a lottery protected New York Knicks pick that becomes how many second round picks? 4, I think, if it does,
4, yeah.
If it doesn't convey this year.
If it's not 5, it may as well be 0.
And 1 million second round picks also from Golden State, via Golden State, this whole triumvirate of teams. And out went Josh Hart. I think getting a first round pick, even if it may not end up being a first round pick for Josh Hart, is good business. And Gary Payton II. We were looking for a little bit of a tell from Portland in terms of what it would be trying to accomplish in the next year or two with Damian Lillard entering his almost he's 32. I don't want to say mid-30s because that means I'm in my mid everything's. What was your take on this sort of split the baby strategy by them?
I do think it's definitely more of a long-term focused strategy for them. It's kind of interesting because you were piecing it together along the way. I felt one thing about the Thybulle trade when it was just him kind of replacing Josh Hart, and then the logic kind of changed when it's actually him replacing Gary Payton II, which makes sense from the standpoint that they have very similar skill sets, particularly at the defensive end of the court. And Thybulle is much younger. I mean, that's the other piece of this besides the draft compensation that they got is, Hart is still reasonably young, but GP2, despite being recently established in this league, is I think 30, and Thybulle is much younger. So you are looking forward there. Nasir Little is going to be very much in the mix for them on the wing. He's played well since coming back from injury. I think he's ready to hold a starting spot there, even though I think GP2 got the start last night when they pulled Hart off the court right before a tip-off against the Warriors, oddly enough. But, I think they have enough there. The other guy that becomes more important with these trades that we haven't seen in over a month now is Justice Winslow, because they really need his playmaking with that second unit, especially when it's Anthony Simons at point guard instead of Damian Lillard. They just need a little more, creativity with that second unit. And Winslow provided it before he got injured. GP2 has provided it since he came back, but they need for sure one of those two guys.
It's pretty artful what they're doing, trying to just bit by bit pick up some stuff that serves them well in not a post-Dame world, but just like the next half decade world, like long-term, medium-term thinking, but still in Thybulle particularly. And I don't think Hart and Payton are like defining players on their team. It's not like you look at them and like, well, they're taking a big step back. Thybulle, Reddish, like they get a little younger, but these guys have played in the NBA, not recently in Reddish's case. And maybe you don't hurt your present all that much at all. And they seem content to just sort of straddle that line and hope somehow to catch lightning in a bottle in the next 2 or 3 seasons with Dame. Like maybe Sharp pops. Maybe Simons, who's already popped a little bit, pops a lot. Maybe there's a crazy trade that falls into their lap or they hit a home run in the draft. But it seems like they're almost trying for the JV version of like the 2011 Mavs, where you just hang in, and like everything breaks right in 1 year. But those Mavericks teams are obviously way better previously to 2011 than the current Blazers teams. I say this because KP, I don't know about you. I heard nothing about Simons and I heard nothing about Sharp. I heard no evidence that any part of the Blazers was like, we have to accelerate our timetable to try to win with older veterans or prime age veterans around Damian Lillard.
Yeah, it was nothing like the sort of trades that we talked about last week on this podcast. I mean, I think the one interesting question I had about Portland's moves is I had them when we did our mock off season on the Dunked On podcast. And the guy I really identified as my target in a Josh Hart trade was, funny enough, Sadiq Bey, who ended up involved in a trade that they were in. And you look at the structure of it, it seems that just as easily it could have been a 3-team trade between Detroit, Golden State, and Portland, leave Atlanta out of it entirely. And therefore the Blazers end up with Saddiq Bey instead of all those second round picks. I mean, he's someone who gives them a little more size on the wing than even Thibault. Cam Reddish does do that, but I'm a little more confident in Bey as a shooter and just an all-around contributor than I am in Cam Reddish at this point. And he's got that very low salary for next season, which is, ideal with their luxury tax concerns. So, whether that was an option and how strongly they kick that around is something I'd be curious to know.
If you were the Warriors, would you rather have Bey or Gary Payton II?
I understand why they took GP2. Bey would have been a lot bigger savings. He's a better shooter. He gives them a slightly different, more size relative to Dante DiVincenzo this year. I mean, I think a lot of the GP2 trade was them recognizing that they're going to have a tough time re-signing Dante DiVincenzo next year, just using the taxpayer mid-level exception. So get out ahead of that a little bit. But I could see the argument for them to get Bey as well. It's just much clearer in my mind, in Portland's case, because they didn't end up with a player at all. I guess they did in Kevin Knox, I should say.
Yeah, Kevin Knox. I forgot about Kevin Knox. There's a lot of guys. It's like a lot of guys got traded. It's like we're gonna forget them. Saddiq Bey is wrapping up his third year, so he will be extension eligible after this season. His new contract, whatever it is, will not kick in until 24-25. So that's where the cost pain comes. Until next year, he'd be pretty cheap, relatively speaking, for the Warriors. I think I'd rather have Saddiq Bey than Gary Payton II. And I know I don't have the same long-term cost certainty I have with Gary Payton II. Am I crazy? I just feel like that they need that size more than they need another guard. And I say that knowing we've seen GP2 work for their team. I think I'd rather have Saddiq Bey.
Not at all. And I think part of it is my belief in Saddiq Bey as a shooter. One thing I looked at in the trade grades analysis is you look at the shot quality that he's gotten in Detroit compared to, I picked DeAndre Hunter in Atlanta as someone who, presumably is going to get similar shot attempts to what Bey will there. And it's like a 1.5% difference in 3-point percentage just based on the quality of the 3-point attempts they're getting. That takes Saddiq Bey right there to league average. And I still think he's a little bit better shot maker than we've seen the last 2 years when you look at his Villanova track record in his first season in the NBA.
What do you think of Josh Hart's fit in New York and what they gave up for him? Again, a lottery protected New York pick, not one of the many extra picks they own from other teams, their own pick this year. But if it's in the lottery, they keep it. And in that case, they go 4 seconds to Portland. And so that's a pick there's going to be some suspense over whether it conveys or not. What do you think of Hart's fit with the Knicks?
Well, second consecutive year, the Blazers have had some suspense over a pick like this. If you go back to the New Orleans one last year. Yeah, I like the structure of a deal like this because it's actually kind of the opposite of the McCollum trade. Like the more he helped the Pelicans, the worse the return was for the Blazers. Here, if Josh Hart helps the Knicks get to the playoffs, the Blazers get a first-round pick. If not, they get the seconds. That kind of makes sense. Is more of almost like a baseball or an NFL style conditional draft pick that isn't technically allowed in the NBA. I mean, the odds are if they do get that first round pick, which I think they probably will, the Knicks are a comfortable favorite.
Yeah, you said
to make the playoffs.
The Knicks are projected pretty favorably, right, to be in the playoffs, whether it's top 6 or through the play-in.
Yeah, BPI had them up to 94% after this trade. That was before all the other stuff went down. So I don't know if that's changed a little bit since then, but and if they do get it, it's probably going to be in the teens. We're not talking about, pick 28 as a realistic possibility. So I think that's why, the value made sense for Portland's standpoint. From New York, I initially did not like it at all because it seems like they're pretty well set on the wing with, Grimes, Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley. And one of my strongest takes is that Emmanuel Quickley is just a really good basketball player. Good things always seem to happen when he's on the court. And this year you can't use the argument that, oh, well, of course they do. The Knicks reserves are all really good and their starting lineup is relatively much weaker. So all their starters look good in terms of net plus minus. This year, it's really just Quickly when he's on the court.
Yeah, he's been awesome. I mean, awesome. A defensive demon, getting around screens, getting deflections. He moves without the ball on offense. That was my concern on Hart to the Knicks. I love Josh Hart. I think he's a really good player. Um, the Knicks have a pretty tight 9-man rotation. My guess is he would just take Deuce McBride's minutes as the 9th man. He does give you a little bit more positional flexibility if you want to play more wings at the same time. The Knicks are a pretty orthodox rotational team under Tom Thibodeau, so I'm not sure how much they'll do that. I guess he gives you some, he's got that funky contract next year that's a player option, but then becomes non-guaranteed if he picks it up. So who knows if he'll be on the team. If he is, I guess he gives you some insurance with like the Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly extension talk, so he doesn't play the same position as those guys. I'm just a little curious about the fit, because to give up a first, even if it ends up being 18, 19, 20, or 4 seconds, I want a little bit more clarity on the fit. And because he's just become so 3-point phobic, although in the last week or two, someone's clearly told him, dude, you got to shoot. The Knicks are not a really good 3-point shooting team already. They play Barrett, Randall, and the traditional center together a lot. And I don't know how they can't afford another non-shooter really plopping into those groups. So I'm a big Josh Hart fan, but I'm a little, I don't know. We'll see. He's what he is a basketball player. So like basketball players tend to find ways to make things work. He's high IQ. He's a good screener. He looks like Draymond lately with like dribble handoffs and stuff because nobody's guarding him. So he'll probably find a way to make it work. I am curious though about the fit.
Yeah, I think we're in a similar position about this one. I really didn't like it at first and then kind of talked myself into it a little more because, if you can carve a few minutes out from that spot, the other aspect of it is New York's defensive rebounding has been a weakness this season after being a strength last season. Hart's going to help there. And it particularly has come when Quentin Grimes has been on the bench, which is presumably when you're going to be playing Hart.
Hart is maybe the best rebounding guard in the whole league, and the epitome of, if you want the ball, go get the ball. Because when he gets rebounds, sometimes he doesn't pass, and he'll go coast to coast ahead of everyone else in the game and just be like, all right, I'm taking it all the way. It's my shot attempts. Another little trade that I haven't talked about yet. Philly. This one snuck under the radar. I kind of like the Jalen McDaniels move for them, snagging him from Charlotte for seconds, I think, in a 3-team trade. Not a big name. He's Jaden McDaniels' brother. Jaden is the bigger name in Minnesota. Only shooting 32% from 3. Is an unrestricted free agent after this year for a team that, if Harden comes back at whatever price, is going to be already right up against the tax. So maybe they don't end up keeping him at all. Maybe some things happen and they do end up keeping him. I kind of like that as a swing for them. It effectively cost them Thibault because they wanted to get under the tax. What do you think of that? Is this just a nothing burger to you, or is this a something burger?
I liked it in terms of, look, we know what Matisse Thybulle is in Philadelphia, the difficulty of the fit with his non-shooting, and the fact that his role has been much smaller this season. So I thought it made sense for them to grab value for him now while they can. And I thought Jalen McDaniels was, a good target at the trade deadline. To me, he especially made sense if you were a team that was planning to use cap space, because he's got that minimum cap hold next summer that you could use to re-sign him and then go over the cap. Like if the Lakers had gone in a very different direction and they had acquired him instead of Rui Hachimura, he wouldn't have cut into their cap space almost at all. And I think has been, frankly, a more productive player this season than Rui has been, although Rui's playing better is perked up with the Lakers, certainly. In Philadelphia, we'll see how much they use him. It's a slightly different defensive style than the guys they have. They have so many of those linebackers, Houston style, with Daniel House Jr. and PJ Tucker. Jalen McDaniels is different than that. He's all length at the defensive end. So I think there's probably going to be a matchup along the way where the guy is, a little bit too big for D'Anthony Melton, but maybe too quick for those Tucker and House types. And you're going to want to put Jalen McDaniels on them. And even though he's not a great 3-point shooter, he's certainly a much more willing one than Thibault. So it doesn't gum up the offense nearly as much.
I just lost belief in Thibault as a fit in Philadelphia. The numbers actually say they've been good when he's been on the floor this year. It's hard to play a center, whether he's operating from the post or the nail, and a complete zero shooter. And he's not even a zero shooter. He just doesn't want to shoot very much. And he's often not at the 3-point arc at all. And he's just not that comfortable with the ball. I just didn't buy it. And at least this is something that I could buy. Man, I really want to trust the Sixers, Kevin. I really want to trust the Sixers. And I think Jalen McDaniels will help them. I've said all season, we talk about them at ESPN like they're some cute little ambitious pseudo contender compared to the Celtics and the Bucks. Like there's a big two, and then there's Philly. It's like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. And I'm like, why can't they be as good as those teams? And they're now bringing Maxey off the bench. That's interesting. They made a small little trade today. They still have to figure out the backup center thing. I guess we'll see who becomes available for them. I like the lineups they're playing, experimenting with the 3-guard lineups with Embiid on the floor. I do not like these. Do not like sitting Embiid and Harden at the same time. Do not like, dislike, hard dislike. And then they just have a way of making me not trust them in the end. Like that loss against Boston without half its team and a lot of its starters last night. There are a lot of possessions. You watch Embiid, there are a lot of possessions where he doesn't get the ball and he kind of slumps his shoulders and slinks over to the corner and lets Harden cook. There's still a lot of those. Harden has deferred to him. It has been Joel's team. He's playing out of his mind when he plays well, like when he rolled over Jokic a couple weeks ago. I don't know, man. Sometimes once every couple weeks they play a game that's like, oh my God, this makes me worried. But on paper, on talent, they should have a shot.
Look, the answer is it's been all season. It's like there's nothing they can do in the regular season to really prove that they're at that Boston and Milwaukee level, because those teams have done it in the playoffs in a way that Philadelphia, in part because of Joel Embiid's postseason injuries, just hasn't. And, we just won't be able to know for sure until we see it on the court in the postseason. But I agree that it's not a giant gap between those top two. And I think, one of the outcomes of today, those three teams made trades. You look at 4 through 7 in the East. Miami made a trade to dump Dwayne Dedmon earlier in the week, and maybe that'll help them in the buyout market. New York was the only one of those teams, though, that made an addition to help them win in the playoffs. It seems to me to increase the gap between the top 3 in the East and everyone else.
Yep, I said exactly the same thing on NBA Today. The gap between the top 3 and the rest of the East widened. Thank you for reminding me to talk about Jae Crowder. And the Philly thing, we're sleeping on what's at stake for the Sixers this year, and we're sleeping on Chris Middleton's player option for next year. Those are two topics that haven't been discussed enough in terms of the implications of what a postseason failure might be for some teams. Philly, like James Harden could be a free agent. If they lose earlier than they want and something happens with him, the implications of that let's put it this way. There are teams around the league who are rooting for that scenario because they know the big fella will look around and maybe think, uh-oh, this kind of went haywire. On the other hand, like, it's not like Ben Simmons would be helping their team right now.
Well, yes, it's tough to look back on that one from a year ago and how it has not gone the way that the Nets hoped thus far. I mean, the scenario is, we talked about Jalen McDaniels' low cap hold. If you were a cap space team, if Harden leaves, you probably try to move Tobias Harris and then become a cap space team. I don't know who you're targeting, Fred VanVleet, I guess at that point, but Kyrie. I don't know about that one, but that's an interesting, like somewhere deep in the recesses of the Sixers training facility, there's a whiteboard where they have sketched out what the plan is for that scenario, and Jalen McDaniel's cap hold figures into it.
Way back in the preseason, I said keep an eye on the Bucks for Jae Crowder. They finally got Jae Crowder. The longest courtship in the history of NBA role players has ended. Jae Crowder is a buck in exchange for Jordan Nwora, George Hill, Serge Ibaka, and 5 second-round picks. 5 is the number everyone has settled on for the number of second-round picks that gets a deal done and also sounds totally ridiculous when you say it out loud. It's a perfect amount of second-round picks. What do you think of Jae Crowder's fit with the Bucks?
I mean, I think especially with Chris Middleton coming back and looking good recently in his limited minutes, and Joe Ingles giving them some contribution off the bench, that their needs were less offensive than they maybe looked like early in the season when they were struggling at that end, and Giannis was just carrying way too large a load, and you could see it, and it reflected in his offensive efficiency. So then you go back to kind of what we anticipated about them since the PJ Tucker trade, which is they were kind of still one switchable defender who allowed them to play Giannis at center short. And Jae Crowder is, maybe not as physical a defender as PJ Tucker. I don't know if anyone, just about anyone is, but he's close to that mold. Certainly the closest thing they've had since, with all due respect to Semi Ojeleye.
Oh God, don't remind me that I thought Semi Ojeleye was gonna be the surprise player of last season. Just a year ago.
It feels so long.
Yeah, I think Bobby Portis, I think, is coming back soon. So Milwaukee's need for another traditional 4 is going to get a little bit less with him back. But when Giannis has been sitting in the interim, they've been playing 4 guards a lot. And so Crowder will beef that up. And he just gives them more lineup flexibility, more heft, the same PJ Tucker kind of piece that we've talked about. His shooting is the most wild variable in the NBA. Like sometimes Jae Crowder will go 5 of 7 from 3, and then he'll go like, has he made one in 3 weeks? But I just don't think this one can hurt. He gives them some lineup versatility and toughness. And at heart, this is really a team that wins ugly. It wins by beating the crap out of you. And I don't know, they were my pick to win the title this year. It feels like, knock on wood, if Chris Middleton can stay healthy, and he's had a couple really good games in the last 10 days and looked a little bit more like himself. Drew Holiday's been great all year. Giannis is Giannis. Like they have enough, I think. I think Javon Carter has earned Mike Budenholzer's trust there as a rotation, just the pest who's shooting tons of threes. All of a sudden, Javon Carter every game takes 2 shots, where I'm like, he's allowed to do that? Like, can I sign up? Can I sign with the Bucks and just jack threes? And Joe Ingles,
it's great. Like that's
good.
the problem with Javon Carter is, like, you have to shoot those to keep defenses honest. Like I was really pleased with how he took 2 of them against Portland the other night, and I was like, man, those are quick trigger 3-point.
Oh, he'll just dribble up in transition with nobody under the rim and jack them like he's Steph Curry or something. What's your epitaph for the Brooklyn Nets?
I mean, they're going to be one of the greatest what if franchises in NBA history. It goes up with, like, unfortunately, a number of injuries for the Blazers. You look at the, that Brandon Roy, Greg Oden era squad. Orlando, if they had been able to keep Shaq and Penny together, is got to be one of the great what if teams. I mean, the injuries in that Milwaukee series, starting with Kyrie at the end of, I believe that was game 3, right? When they had a chance to go up 3-0 in that series and claim what would have probably been an insurmountable lead.
That was the rock fight game. That was an ugly, ugly game.
Yeah. And it just, every time it seemed like things were going right, something new cropped up. And last week, obviously, with Kyrie's trade request is the ultimate example of that. But, I think that Kevin Durant going immediately from one team where previously he had 2 all NBA caliber guards to another team where he has 2 all NBA caliber guards is proof that whatever happens, the super team concept is not going anywhere.
No, everyone writes the super team obit and the big three obit. I'm like, teams are always going to fall over themselves to get stars because in the end, you need stars to win. There are different kinds of team construction. Sometimes you need two. Sometimes you need one and a bunch of really, really good players. Sometimes chemistry can overcome a talent deficit. Yeah, I've called them many times the greatest theoretical team in the history of the NBA. It's still mind-boggling that Harden, Kyrie, and KD played 16 games together, and they looked just outrageously good in those 16 games. And
I mean,
then
speaking of, it was just last season, the game they won in Chicago, where they just blew the doors off the Bulls, which in hindsight may have told us something about the Bulls as well as the Nets. But that's one of those moments where it's like, okay, everything's coming together. And like less than a month later, James Harden was a Sixer. Here's the question I've been pondering about the Nets in the last 24 hours, though, when I've had some time to think because I haven't been writing. If they had, not signed KD and Kyrie in the first place, if we unwind all of this to July 2019 and played out the last 4 years with them deciding to pass on that based on what was coming, would they be in a better position than they are right now? I mean, obviously they'd probably have their own draft picks that now Houston has many of them, but they've got a lot of draft picks coming from Phoenix, and they have kind of a sneaky, fascinating roster right now with like all the 3-and-D wings in the league somehow accumulated on this one roster. And, maybe Cam Thomas is going to be the shot creating star they need to lead them to glory.
I think Cam Thomas is legit. Like, this could be, I don't want to say Linsanity 2.0, but I think he's legit. He's always been able to score. Now he's getting an opportunity to like, dude, we don't have anybody else that could really do this. You want to just do it? And he's doing it pretty efficiently. The question is going to be, can he do it in a secondary role? Can he do it in an off-ball role? Can he do it in a spot-up role? But I don't think the scoring is super fluky with him. I mean, the 40 points is fluky, obviously, but I think he can score. Like, I think they play tonight. So for all I know, as we're recording this, he's like 2 for 20 and stinking up the joint. But I think he's a real player. KD certainly thought he was a real player.
Look, we know one of those games is coming eventually, possibly on national television if it's this one, but let's see, 6 to start it and scoreless. So well on his way to that kind of rose. But look, people that watched him at LSU, and then I've talked to some people who watched him even going back to his high school days, like, this guy got buckets like no one else. Now, he didn't necessarily do a whole lot, which made him quite a fascinating prospect because you don't usually see guys like that in the NBA anymore, at least not at shooting guard. It's kind of an Allen Houston 90s archetype, or to go back to some of the 80s small forwards where it was, just basically, I'm going to get my 25, you get your 25, we'll all be good.
Allen Houston, the king of like the 21 1-and-1 stat line. Yeah, that's a fascinating counterfactual. Would the Nets be better off? I mean, I opened this podcast with Bobby saying that I will always believe that if they had their druthers, they just would have signed Durant and not Kyrie. But they came as a package, so they got the package. And then once they got Harden, I think they would have, if they had their druthers, that like, what's the best version of our team? I think they could have flipped Kyrie for lots of stuff if they had to go ahead to do it and sort of round out the depth around KD and Harden, which really makes sense as a duo. But when they had the thing is, like, laugh at them all you want. When they had those three guys, they had built a team that was going to be the undisputed championship favorite just last season. And it never came to be, just never came to be. And maybe it was inevitable. Maybe there was always going to be something with Kyrie. Maybe the health issues would have popped up, but they were that good. They were a legit superstar, complimentary big three with enough around them that they could. I picked them to win the title last year, and I didn't think twice about it before everything.
Before gestures broadly and all of this. I hope people will remember that moment after game 2 of the Milwaukee-Brooklyn series, because as much as I talked about the end of game 3 and the chance to go up 3-0, it was game 2. They blew out Milwaukee, looked completely unbeatable. People were wondering who was going to be the Bucks' next coach after Mike Budenholzer and
Harden was out that. Harden was out that game.
Yeah, he went out in game 1. Yeah, they did it without Harden. So truly a great what if.
Is there an under the radar trade that you really liked or didn't like, or a team that was inactive that puzzled you, but in their inactivity, is there anything we haven't hit that you really want to hit?
I mean, Cleveland is maybe the most interesting inactive team to me in terms of, look, this is a team that by point differential is a contender in the Eastern Conference, didn't have a lot to upgrade. And I think probably their question was, is whatever we're going to get going to be that much better for us than presumably Karis LeVert? Is the salary going out in that kind of trade, like the LeVert for Tim Hardaway Jr.
I don't think they ever wanted to do that. I don't think that was a thing.
Never made much sense to me. That's not solving your problem of needing a more 3-and-D type player in that role. And I was really impressed when I saw them play down in Portland. LeVert took on the challenge of defending Damian Lillard late in that game and was shockingly good in that role. So, if he doesn't necessarily have the size to do that in every matchup against the threes that you're going to face, but if he can provide that, it becomes a lot easier to finish games with him in that spot.
JB Bickerstaff deserves some Coach of the Year love for this, and the players deserve a lot of credit for it too. And I've written about this in 10 things. Their perimeter players have been defending their asses off all year, and none of them, except Okoro and to a lesser degree Rubio, who hasn't played much, had a reputation as guys who really were plus defenders. In fact, Donovan Mitchell was coming off a postseason run in which his defense was sort of a national stage humiliation for him. They're denying the ball. They're getting around screens. They're switching seamlessly. They're flying diagonally across the floor in rotation. And that's a credit to them. And that's a credit to the coaches who have clearly said, this is what you have to do. Their defense is not just Mobley and Allen. It's most importantly Mobley and Allen, who are incredible. And Mobley in the last month has had some moments on offense where you're like, it's starting to happen for Evan Mobley. It's the guards too. And I also wonder if Isaac Okoro has done in the last 3 weeks. I never know how a team should react to that, but he has looked kind of like a different player in the last 3 weeks. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there was a period of time where I think he was hitting over 50% of his threes in a stretch, and like, he's not going to do that. But the point is, even if he's not going to keep doing that, he's probably going to shoot better than he has been before. So, even if he can get up to that, 35, 36, 37% range, that's a meaningful difference and makes it a lot easier to keep him on the court in a playoff setting.
What a 90, however many hours, what a 6 days it's been in the NBA, starting from the Kyrie news that he wanted out all the way to now. Just a wild week, really wild. Who's the favorite to win the title now? According to either your brain or your numbers or both?
I've not looked at any of my own projections yet. I'm still probably going to go Boston, but Phoenix has made an interesting case in the Western Conference. I mean, I think that's the other aspect of this. Why the Suns would go all in on this now is, look, I think we can go too far with the not being scared of teams thing, because you can not be scared your way into a 4-0 sweep. If you're like the Nets last year, I don't know that they were scared of the Celtics, and that didn't really help them. But I think the fact that the Nuggets don't necessarily inspire the same fear that the Warriors would have if they were the team leading the West by 4.5 games right now, I think is a factor in Phoenix being so aggressive. And I think the Suns, in my opinion, are probably the favorites in the Western Conference. I like how they match up with Denver.
What do you like about how they match up with Denver? Their ability to attack Jokic in the pick and roll with so much jump shooting.
Yep. I mean, they're not going to make as many mid-rangers as they did in that 2021 series. And Denver is going to have, better point of attack defense and just a lot more offensive weapons than they had in that one with Jamal Murray not in the lineup. But, still you look at Jokic's weaknesses, a bunch of guys who can make mid-range shots off the dribble seem to line up pretty well with that.
I think Denver has been training for a series like that all year, in how they've switched up their defense from game to game and quarter to quarter. I think if that series happened we would see some interesting stuff. Like we would see Jokic maybe on Torrey Craig sometimes, and maybe you try. I mean, the problem is you can't put Aaron Gordon on Ayton because you need Aaron Gordon on Durant. Maybe you put Michael Porter on Ayton. I don't know. Maybe you try you can't play zone against them either. And obviously you could just use Torrey Craig as the screener if Jokic is there. They try to, do the old Brook Lopez switch where you see the pick and roll coming and you switch him out of it while he's on his way up. Their depth doesn't concern you at all?
Not that much, because I feel like the guys that I could have used them to add one more guard. I think that would have been useful because
Chris Haynes reported that they may be in on Reggie Jackson. Does that helps? No,
I don't know if that moves the needle for me. I mean, he's an upgrade from the minutes they were getting from Dwayne Washington Jr. earlier this year, but that would be the one thing that concerns me about their depth. But to me, the guys who played in the front court, like Torrey Craig, it's
been great.
He's a useful role player, and they got by without Cam Johnson a lot of this season, without anything from Jae Crowder. So you're not going to miss those two guys to the same degree you would if they had been in the lineup every night. And I think getting TJ Warren in this deal is a sneaky, huge part of it. He's been pretty good for Brooklyn, can sop up a lot of those minutes. I mean, I think there's a world where you could finish games at times with Durant at 5, Warren and Craig as your forwards, and Booker and CP as your backcourt. That's a pretty tough lineup to guard.
Kevin Pelton has grades up for every trade. Anyone get a D?
I still got more.
What do we still got to do?
Oh, I think I still have like 6 left.
Do you got to grade all of them? Do you really? Can't you just be like, this trade happened? I grade it as it occurred. Like, it doesn't need a grade.
If I graded that Kessler Edwards to a Sacramento trade, I'm going for completeness.
I honestly forgot. I forgot that happened. Thank you for reminding me that Kessler Edwards is. I think, is he still on the Kings? Did they waive him?
Well, they didn't trade for anyone else, so I think they're going to keep him.
All right, Kevin Pelton, thank you, sir, for rounding out this podcast. Hey, look, everybody, this was a crazy, crazy trade deadline. We just went a little over 90 minutes. There's going to be more to do. If we didn't hit your team in the depth that you think we should have hit it, that was probably on purpose. We barely talked about Toronto, mostly standing pat. We barely talked about other teams that did a little. Chicago, mostly standing pat. We will have time to get to those. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the weekend. Kevin Pelton, thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.